What's up, everybody? We wanted to take a quick moment to remind each of you to please like, share, comment, subscribe to the podcast. Tommy,
Ring that bell.
ring the bell. It goes a long way to support the podcast. Besides that, Tommy and I offer online coaching. The links for that will be below. The link for my merch store will be below as well. And without further ado, we bring to you a Thinking Man's podcast. A Thinking Man's podcast. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of a Thinking Man's podcast. I'm your host. My name is Joseph PIRCHER. With me, as always, my good friend Tommy Stiles. And today we have the pleasure of interviewing and speaking with a man that really needs no introduction if you've paid attention to bodybuilding for the last 20 years. But we have the pleasure of speaking with Skip Hill, one of the OG bodybuilding coaches and bodybuilders himself. So Skip, thanks for taking the time to join the show. How are you, man?
Good. I appreciate you guys having me.
Yeah.
I have my sexy radio voice on because I have not been up for very long, and I've been battling, much like Tommy has, with something over the weekend. I don't know. So if you don't recognize me because of my sexy voice or my lack of tan, it is me. I'm the old white guy.
All right. So, man, so it's a question that I feel like we must start with. I'm sure anyone that's listened to you is familiar with it. I'm sure you're sick of explaining it and talking about it, but it's something that we would be remiss if we didn't get to.
I am
so,
straight. We can get that out of the way right
Oh, okay.
away.
All right. Well, then let me cross that off the
Next
list.
question.
Show's over.
Next question. But we want to talk about skip loading and how it came to be. And also, I'm sure, yes, you've talked about it, ad nauseum on different shows, but also a different perspective on it would be hearing how it's evolved, how it came to be, but then also how it's evolved and how your process has kind of evolved with like deploying it. So, let us know, how did it come to be and how has it changed over the years?
Well, first, honestly, I don't get tired of discussing it, even though I've discussed it for 20 years or so. Right now, the timing is good to discuss it again because, and you guys probably know this, you probably see this, a lot of people do. If you're in the industry long enough, you'll see that things kind of cycle through. Yeah. What is trendy now won't be trendy in 3 or 4 years. I think we're kind of coming out of the intra phase, which is not to say that intra doesn't work and it's not great. It does. But I think over the last 3 to 4 years, supplement companies started focusing on it so much, and it became this thing that it's a deal breaker or a deal maker, and there isn't much that's a deal breaker or a deal maker outside of taking your gear, training, sleeping. And having a good diet. Outside of that, there really aren't these big, huge things that are going to all of a sudden give you this genetic superiority that you're all of a sudden in 2 years going to go up on stage and kick someone's ass when you didn't do that 2 years prior. So right now the trend is, or it's beginning to, I'm not sure, but I've seen a couple of my peers whom I have great respect for. So let me say first that there are 1,000 different ways to get to the same destination. Okay. You can get just as sliced and peeled 100, 200, 500 different ways. So I'm only saying this to be respectful because I don't want this to be a right or wrong type thing, which is funny because I've never made skip loading or contest preparation or getting huge a right or wrong thing. I've always put my methods out there and said, either come along for the ride, you're either on board or you're not. But a lot of other people do that, and it is something that drives me nuts. It's a bit of a nails on a chalkboard thing in this industry. There aren't right or wrong. There's just different sometimes there's some fucked up shit, don't get me wrong. And if dropping F-bombs is not your thing, tell me now, because
let it fly.
Okay.
Let it fly.
Right. Because absolutely. I can become very PC very quickly. I'm getting better at it.
No, we want unfiltered skit. No, we want the real skit. Yeah.
As it is not something that I have fully mastered yet.
Yeah, no, that's okay.
So, there are a couple guys who are, there's more than a couple, but a couple have stood out to me that kind of give me the impression that we're starting to go back to this antiquated, not necessarily low calorie intake, high calorie output, but I call it antiquated because if you're going to go against either skip loading, refeeding, cheat meals, because of this discipline thing, that you're not disciplined if you're eating outside of the parameters of your typical boring archaic bodybuilding diet, you're doing things wrong. And obviously I don't think that's the case. So with skip loading, I mean, for anybody who doesn't know the history of this, and there will be some, I always give credit where credit is due. I was taken under Zilla's wing, and Zilla, if anybody's listening, new next generation, the younger kids are like, that's a weird name. Us older guys, we refer to people by their message board names from the day.
Yeah.
So clearly no one would name their kid Zilla, or I would hope that they wouldn't name their kid Zilla. Never crossed my mind. And I have a lot of respect for Zilla. I had 4 kids, didn't name one of them Zilla. So this is going back to the early 2000s, late 90s, on the message boards, when the message boards were just coming out. And I just was at Swiss a couple weeks ago. I don't want to get off on a tangent, but I bumped into Justin Harris, and him and I started on Anabolics and Anabolics EX back in the day, early 2000s. And he even, not only did he remember that, which I was flattered, but he remembered the discussion we were having, that I changed his mind about clean use. And it was cool to go back, 22 years. We passed each other in the hall, and I was hoping to bump into him, but he gave a presentation at 8 a.m. and 8 a.m. don't work for me because I work all night. So my ass slept till like noon, and I caught the presentations in the afternoon. Anyway, that was a giant tangent, and that's what I do sometimes. But nonetheless, this goes back a long way. So Zilla was a guy that he had shit loading. And the premise was very simple. It's just on the morning of the show. Well, I would even go so far as to say this. Most people at that time were looking so much better the day after the show. And they were trying to figure out, we were as a group or as an industry, trying to figure out why that was the case. And it was pretty simple. A lot of people would overdo their water control, diuretic at that time. I mean, diuretics were pretty much like you had to take them. And I'm not anti-diuretic, but I'm also not so pro-diuretic that you need to get on the diuretic train. Sometimes they're needed, sometimes they're not. Depends on the situation, the individual, that sort of thing. But basically, shit loading was you would wake up the morning of the show and kind of treat it like it was the day after. You would have a big breakfast. You would, make sure you had plenty of sodium, the things that you at that time were like, what the hell are you thinking? You're going to take in a bunch of sodium. You're going to look like shit. You're going to hold a bunch of water. When in reality, that's not exactly, it's a complicated issue, but that's not how it works. So the fastest way to go flat is to cut or restrict your sodium too much. Obviously, we know that now. It just took us 20 years to figure it out. So this is how it started, the shit loading. And I started doing it, and I was thinking, oh my goodness, this is brilliant. Like, this guy, this is awesome. We're bringing that next day condition to the show day. Now, I will say this too. There are still some people who swear they look better the next day because they catch themselves in bathroom lighting or elevator lighting, boutique lighting. I say there's a Jimmy Choo store here in Miami that I swear is just the best lighting ever. And I say that because everybody comes across that place where they go, gosh, I wish I could take all of my pictures here. The point is even though you might look great that next day under different lighting, it's not stage lighting. And stage lighting is harsh. You guys know that. A lot of your best pictures as a competitor typically won't come from the stage. And some shows have better lighting than others. So you can have great lighting, then you get to the nationals and you're like, wow, this lighting is horrible. We need to back the photographer away. We need to back out, that sort of thing. Because if you can't get those shadows, then you don't look as good. Armor's Pro Gym is a good example. Phil Heath always took his pictures from the side in the one place of that gym that we all knew you're going to get a badass picture out of this position in the gym. So point being is sometimes people are right and they do look better the day after show versus sometimes you're not right. You look more vascular, look more full, but you've also lost detail and separation that you wouldn't have if you were on stage, understage. Because the truth is that's where you're judged. The lighting can be shitty, but that's where you're judged. That's where you're all standing and you're all in the lineup, and that's where they're giving out the trophies and the placings and the qualifications and the pro cards. It is what it is. So had to differentiate between whether you really did look better the next day or if you were kidding yourself, in denial, whatever. But the point is that it was working the large majority of the time. What I found personally was it wasn't working very well for guys who were bigger. Zilla was Not much is known about Zilla. I may have passed him in gyms, and the guy was very incognito. And back then, you guys know too, we would chop our heads off, to take
Yeah.
pictures.
Oh, you have to blur your face or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
thought the DEA was in the bushes and
Yeah. And God forbid if you had tattoos or a scar or something, it's like, you better not put that up.
Exactly. So everything was very anonymous because we were all paranoid that we were going to get busted with good reason. We were openly discussing gear. And at that time, closer to the Anabolic Steroid Act of 1991, it caused a lot of problems. Now that time has passed and society has become a little less pro-drug, or a little less anti-drug, I guess, especially with the marijuana laws and everything else, things have loosened up considerably.
Yeah,
nonetheless, what I found was the larger guy, Zilla was kind of I think he was a lightweight or maybe a welterweight. So guys that were smaller, even myself, I was filling out, and I had enough time to fill out prior to going on stage because I was a light heavy. But as people got bigger and they got into the top end of the light heavies, and then they got into the heavies, and God forbid a super heavy, there wasn't enough time. There's more tissue, there's more glycogen store, and of course, triglyceride storage, fat storage, everything else too. At that time, people thought, oh, gee, we're only sucking up carbs. The muscles are only sucking up carbs. Fat, oh, that just gets in the way. Fat is going to make you fat. When in reality, the muscle will suck up fat, triglyceride as well, and you will still. Scott Abel is a good example of that too, but I don't want to get into his methods. This is all about me, not Scott Abel. He can do his own interview.
You're the main character today, Skip.
Right. So what happened was there wasn't enough time for these larger frames. And if you were more depleted, even if you were smaller and you were more depleted, it took time to fill out. So I just felt like, God, I got to tweak this. I got to play with this. And eventually there's still a thread on Professional Muscle that says something like, can't remember what I titled it, but it was like shit loading to skip loading. This is going to be big. And looking back on it, it's funny because not a lot of people, not everybody in the industry knows about it. I think a lot of people know about it. I think it's well known. It also helped to bring in the age of how important refeeding and cheat meals and skip loading. I wish everybody called it skip loading, but it's not. Skip loading might be my baby as far as the method and branding it and that sort of thing. But you can increase your calories, and you can fill out, and you can offset your metabolism with cheat meals and refeeds without it being skip loading. I don't try to latch on to the entire concept and claim it as mine. I didn't reinvent the wheel. I took something and I tweaked it. So a lot of our industry, that's how it works. No one created training. No one created the methods. Even Weider didn't create the methods. I mean, that's kind of a funny. He set up a hell of a good system that he put his name on, and for that, I'm impressed. That's business acumen.
That's
right
marketing.
there. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely brilliant in that regard. A little creepy in other regards, but anyway, this isn't about Weider. And then how everybody became so obsequious or almost sycophantic, with him, the bodybuilders and everything else, kissing his ass and telling it was kind of crazy.
The ring,
but anyway, it was just kind of a weird thing. But I understand why they did it. They thought that they were going to do better kissing his ass. Anyway, it just kind of morphed into this, and it needed to, because it wasn't working all the time. So what I did, which even evolved from that skip loading in 2002 is completely different to what it is now, because I went what I call traditional skip loading, where it was still high carb, but it was very low fat, and it worked very well. Shit loading was just exactly that. You just ate, everything from McDonald's to everything you could get in you with as much sodium and carbs and fats. And it worked well for that reason. It just didn't work well for the larger frames. So it morphed a little bit with skip loading, and I gave credit where credit was due to Zilla. I still do. I am now, which the industry needs more of, but that's another topic altogether. But then over the years, it evolved because I started going hypo for the first couple meals that I was, and it's funny because then the obvious answer is, well, take more insulin. And yes, you absolutely can load with insulin, but you also don't need to. And I wanted to fix the problem that was in front of me without just adding another drug to it. And what I did was I started adding more fat to those first couple meals, and it worked great. And then I had to look into it more, because even I was thinking, man, I don't know if this is right. I'm adding a lot of fat here. I don't want this to, get in the way or limit the progress, limit the results, that sort of thing. So I did what anybody else does. I started digging in, did my due diligence, and learned more, quite frankly, and learned that what we know or what we knew was not necessarily correct. And I think you guys would agree there may not be as much now, but there was certainly a lot 20 years ago that was misunderstood and was accepted as rule prior to. It's almost like when you go back and you read like steroid profiles. A lot of those profiles were written 20 years ago, and then they were just literally copied and pasted. So you were getting the same profile with 3 different words changed. 2008, 2012, they really were it was the same information, just regurgitated. So I started getting outside of the box, and that's really how I became known, I think. Yes, it was skip loading, because skip loading was outside of the box. It wasn't the norm, but I started challenging the things that were known, and not as opposed to just accepting them. So I would challenge them, I would play with it, I would trial and error type shit, and then decide if I thought it worked. The cool thing was I had clients who wanted to do it. I wouldn't push it on their clients, which is a lot of what trainers will do. They're like, well, this worked for me, it'll work for everybody. That's a huge assumption. That's not always going to be the case. But I had clients who literally would come to me, or potential clients, and say, look, I want to try this too. And that's where I started what was called, I can't remember the name of it now, but I would take on clients for very minimal fees, and I would do these are all over intense muscle. I probably did them for 4 or 5 years. They were experiments. So I would take on 8 to 10 people because I would have that interest in doing something. An example would be loading on fruit, because fruit was thought to be this thing where the only place that carb is going to go is into the liver. So, and I'm thinking about, this can't be right. I understand the mechanics of it. And yes, maybe on paper it should be. That's not how it works. And if you're in a depleted state, that if you take in fruit, your liver is going to get ginormous and your skeletal muscle isn't going to fill out. You're going to remain flat. And that's silly. Justin and I, going back to Justin, we talked about that in the early years too, about how silly some of these things are or were that we accepted as fact. So it morphed. The skip loading started from shit loading. It was traditionally high carb, very, very low fat. And then it kind of morphed into more fat. First, it started as the first couple meals, there was more fat so that the blood sugar levels wouldn't go as high. And then, of course, you could ride out more carbs, throughout the rest of the day. And that's where it becomes individual to each person these days. Some will stay lower fat. Some will immediately start with higher fat. And there was one assumption that I went into when I started making the change, and that was that my heavier clients, and I'll use one as an example, he would come to me at like over 300 pounds. I'd be pissed at him every year because I would tell him to stay lean. I'm like, work with me in the off season, we'll keep you lean. And he wouldn't. And he would come back to me at like, I think the last one was like 340 or 330. Whoa. And damn it, if I didn't have to pull off 100 pounds. And then he would look ridiculous. Whoa. He would look great. But it was just this anxious. Every time I'd click on his thread with his check-in, I'd be worried. But he would get there. And the reason I bring him up as an example is because you would think that those guys being hyperinsulinemic, because they're carrying more body fat, they tend to be, by definition, they're hyperinsulinemic. They'll be more sensitive to carbs and insulin. So you would think they're not going to be able to benefit from the higher carb intake at first. So I thought, I got to go higher fat, then I'll shift it. I didn't have to do that. In fact, I rarely had to do that. So there were some things there's just a lot that we learn, even though we know so much shit and we learn so much shit and we trial and error that, I've been doing what I've been doing for a long time and still learning shit. I went to Swiss and I'm like, oh my God, that's the answer I've been looking for to this. Oh my God, that's the answer I've been looking for to that. I probably did that 3 or 4 times over the course of 2 days. So ultimately, I think the last thing I would say on is it's going to continue to evolve. Everything does, or everything should. I want to be the one to continue to evolve and change, especially this method, because I feel like I'm incredibly experienced in this area. But there's a lot to learn. If you've been doing things as long as I have, there's still plenty to learn. And when you think you don't have anything left to learn, use done, or should be. because I know if I was paying someone good money, I would not want to work with someone who thought they knew it all.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like we talk about it on the show all the time. Not to harp on it, but it's like you almost want to have like that white belt mentality where it's like you're always a student, you're always learning.
Sure.
And then so to hear that someone in your shoes, 20 plus years in the game, like really change the game in your own methods, and you're still saying that. So it's like that's a big takeaway for anybody listening, whether you're a coach, an athlete, whatever it is. You should never ever stop learning and seeking out new ways to do things. So exactly. Yeah, that's awesome to hear all that.
So it sounds like your methods your thinking was to break the dogma of bodybuilding as it was. I know what you were saying about like the chicken and rice principle, where like you can't deviate from the 6 foods you're having. And if you were having refeeds with foods that were not deemed bodybuilding foods, you weren't quote unquote suffering. So I think your method has evolved. I kind of want to lead that into the next question. Since you've been around, you're coming from the message boards. Like I came into bodybuilding a little too late to be a part of the message boards. I think I was just catching Instagram at its earliest phase. So what have you noticed being a coach, as someone who started as a coach when it was just the message boards? And let's talk about photos. I mean, you weren't getting the high resolution iPhone quality photos as check-in photos you're getting now. I mean, I've heard stories in the 90s of guys having to send Polaroids next day mail. Yeah. So what has it been like as a coach going from, say, the early 2000s to present day? What is some positives and negatives?
Well, the internet loads faster. I save a lot of time because of technology. You know, it's funny because I harp on technology and I bitch about it, and the people and the things that go on social media. And then I have to laugh and catch myself and go, oh shit, without this, I'd have a regular job making no money. I mean, I started out working with kids. I don't know if you guys know that. I did residential treatment and juvenile detention for kids. And I'll be the first to admit there's no money in it. I mean, yeah. It was all I could do to pay the bills, along with my wife's job. Thankfully, I don't want to say I have a sugar mama, but she does very well. So it's funny that the people in my industry think that my wife carries me, and then my kids, they think that mom goes to work every did when they were younger and didn't make any money at all. The dad had all the money. So it's just kind of a funny dichotomy, but it changed. I mean, I'm going to say what you guys already know, and I'm going to try not to laugh about it because I don't want to rip apart, social media, because it feeds what we do. I know, right? But it is coming from, when Tommy said that he came along in the Instagram thing, I immediately wanted to interject, oh, you're soft, oh, which clearly isn't the case. But what I mean by that is, if we were still in the message board era was so good because you couldn't get away with bullshit. Even though you were anonymous, right, you couldn't get away with any bullshit. You had to prove what you knew, who you were, because you would literally be laughed at. There are relatively well-respected people and I'm not going to mention any names out of respect, because they are, and they have come to be known as really good prep guys and very knowledgeable, but they were laughed off the boards back in the day. Those guys were very happy to see social media come on, because once you made or established a persona, you weren't going to get around it. The only thing that changed for some of those guys was they had a different platform. These days, I mean, with Instagram and everything else, and you guys know this too, there are a lot of trainers who really, and I know this sounds very old and very dated, and of course the old guy is going to say this, but there's just a lot of people who have no business doing what they're doing. They have every right to do it because they can do it. And I used to get very irritated about it, but I heard something on a show one time and I made it fit. And it wasn't too long ago. And so I made it fit to the online training industry. And it goes like this. It's essentially that the online training industry is its own ecosystem that purifies itself. And it does, because I know my clientele isn't going, oh, well, I'll work with this guy that's going to, charge $100 a month. And I use that as an arbitrary number. I'm not going to lose clients to those people. So I'm not directly related to that or financially or from a business standpoint impacted. What bothers me is I used to be very proud of what I did because what I did was unique and it wasn't done by the masses. It wasn't done, not only done, but done well by a lot of people. Now I meet people like when I go to a function with my wife, she's going to get a bunch of awards for South Florida for her business this Friday or for her career. And people are going to ask me what I do when I meet them. And I immediately tell them that I write for the bodybuilding industry. Because if I say or try to explain that I'm an online trainer, I do this or that, they don't understand it. So they immediately say, oh, you're a personal trainer. And then I'm going, no, that's not what I do. I actually make money. I make a living. Like I put 3 of my 4 kids through college. And it becomes this trying to justify what you do versus being embarrassed by it. Not embarrassed, but
that's a fair word.
Yeah, I mean, it's I'm very
depending on how removed the person is that you're speaking to. It's like I'm going through this now, not to take over your point, but I've recently transitioned just in the last year from like always having a regular full-time job and then did coaching on the side trying to build it to now it's my full-time thing and I'm doing better than ever. And yet I have like my extended family, like will reach out to my parents and they'll be like, hey, is he doing okay? Like, what was he thinking? Like, what's he doing? And it's like, little do you know, like things are good,
Exactly. And the standing joke with myself and my wife is my wife will tell the people that she works with when they ask what I do, she says, oh, he sits online all day, surfs porn and Facebook, because they'll see me posting on Facebook, but that's my water cooler time. I've done this for a very long time. And to be honest with you, I finally got out right after COVID. And for 2 years, I trained clients at Titan Gym in Fort Lauderdale because I had been saying for years since we were in Colorado, I got to get out. I'm climbing the walls here. Like I would go somewhere with my wife and I would talk to the cash register lady and talk her ear off. And my wife would be rolling her eyes like, you got to go. I don't get those social interactions. So after COVID, when everybody was bitching about going crazy and stuff, I'm like, this is my life. Welcome to my life. You think you don't get to talk to anybody. I'm going nuts over here. So I did get out and I had high-end clients. I had 5 or 6 clients that fit with I lived 4 minutes from the gym. Beautiful. It was awesome. I had a lot of fun with it. But then we moved downtown West Palm. This is not a green screen behind me. I get
I think that speaks for itself about how the coaching business is going.
Yeah, it's gorgeous. And my wife manages this high rise because that's what she does. She works for New York Life and makes very good money and affords us this beautiful 22nd apartment that looks over, that's Palm Beach behind me, which has a median home income of 11 million. And then it goes to the Atlantic Ocean. Yeah. We go over there when we bring, like if clients visit and everything else, because it's next level over there. They got their own little Rodeo Drive. It's Billy Joel lives over there. Tommy Hilfiger lives over Mar-a-Lago. Obviously Mar-a-Lago is over there. So I had a $200, brunch over there one day. Best brunch I've ever had in my life, but I only went because the client paid for it. $200. I mean, are you kidding me? Holy shit.
Hey, anyway, at least you got what you paid for.
Yeah, it was very good. But coming back to the point, and the point is that it's changed dramatically. It's just not even the same side. I avoided Instagram for a couple of years, and then I saw it start to eat away at my exposure and promote it. And I'm like, I don't have a choice. I got to jump in here. So I jumped in a little bit late with my demographic. Facebook still works very well for me, to be honest. Instagram does too, but my demographic is older. I mean, I write for Elite FTS and have for over 9 years. That demographic, I keep analytics because you have to know where your clients are coming from. So every January I go over the past year or the prior year, and I get those numbers and find out, because when someone onboards with me, I need to know, where did you hear about me? Even if you've known about me, what made you work with me? And one of the most telling statistics, was this, and this was this last January, so it's coming up again. 70%, almost 68% of my 40 and over clientele follows me and knows about me from Elite FTS. So if Elite FTS, unless Dave or Sheena is listening to this, if they said tomorrow, we're not paying you anymore, Do you want to continue to write and be a coach? I'd be like, hell yeah, you didn't need to pay me all along, because, and this is where a lot of people fuck this up, quite frankly. They think they need to be paid for everything they do. And I'm not saying time isn't valuable. And what I'm saying is how much you're paid to do something is not just the check you receive from doing that. It's how it benefits your revenue stream and your brand. And you know, you might think, well, brand, what are you, you're not, it is a brand. The team's, it's a brand, and what you do is a brand. You're building a reputation. Your reputation, exactly. I think I got my little skip here. With my team.
Man, I feel left out. I haven't had mine up in a couple of weeks. Damn.
Got to up your game. Got to get on that.
No, I got one. Yeah, I've been all over the place.
But it is important, and it becomes something that you want. You know, Tommy,
fucking brand. There you go.
Tommy, you want Stiles strength to be recognized, so that even if they might not be able to read it, they see it on a shirt or they see it on a shaker bottle or something. They need to go, oh shit, he's with Tommy, or something like that. So when I'm at a show, you know, people laugh and give me shit all the time. I have jerseys, football jerseys, baseball jerseys that will have.
I've seen clients of yours that post them, and they're fucking sick, dude. It's awesome.
Yeah, it's just important for exposure. And it's funny because I know we want to talk about, you know, bodybuilding stuff, because that's what people want to know. But coaches really should focus sometimes equally on their business acumen and their business ideas and thoughts, because the truth is a lot of people now, not in the past, but a lot of people now are very good at getting people into condition. There's just different methods. And then from there, there's whether you take care of your clients, whether you have a rapport with your clients. Quite frankly, if your parents or your clients like you, my parents don't like me. I don't know what that, maybe that's why no, I'm kidding. But
the Freudian slip there.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of times, let's just say you struggle with a client and you have a problem and you go to a show. I mean, I had a problem with one of my 212 guys earlier this year, and it ended up that we're not working together anymore. It was a typical normal thing that happens. Sometimes you just don't nail it. Sometimes it's not what you want to do, it's what the client wants to do. And you make a mistake and you go with what the client wants to do without that gut feeling or thinking that it's not going to work. The point is there's just a lot to business that you have to learn that is equally as important, because if you do screw something up or you don't get something right, the rapport with that client is what will a lot of times keep you working with the client. They will trust you. They will know that, okay, that didn't go well. We need to change that. We need to move forward. And I trust that you're going to be able to do that. There's a lot more than just, oh, well, I know how to diet. And that's where the trainers now who are getting into things, who don't have much experience, they make those mistakes and thinking, oh, well, I've done this with 5 or 10 guys, so I can do it. You may have done it with 5 or 10 guys. I mean, anybody can train someone who has a metabolism that doesn't have obstacles or hurdles. But when you run into those things, then what are you going to do without that extended knowledge base? Which is not to say that people can't get into training, because that's not what I'm saying either. There was a point where I was it irritated me. I'm like, God, everybody and their mother, like, what do you think you know? That sort of thing. But that, I think, and I don't want to make excuses for it, but I think that's something that anyone would say in any industry who's been around for a long time, is almost like, God, you all have to water down, you know, the industry that we're in. But I have come to realize with my wisdom, which means I'm getting old, that it doesn't take away from what we're all doing. It doesn't negatively impact those who do know. It just purifies itself. If a new trainer comes in and they're good at what they do, they will train more clients, they will be able to demand more money, and they'll become more popular. And if they're not, then they fall off and 10 more come in and try it too.
I think you made a couple of good points there that I really want to highlight, because we do have a lot of people on here who are aspiring coaches or newer coaches. And Joe and I are like, you know, this is my 5th year coaching. I'm very much at the low end of the mountain climbing up, and the message boards they bred an atmosphere of respect and credibility. Mm-hmm. Don't speak until you have had some skin in the game. And I think now with social media, you've seen do a show, automatically start taking on clients, put it in your bio that you're taking on clients or an online coach. And I think going into economically, we're going into a recession. I think the phonies and the jokers, they're going to get exposed, because it's going to be seen who's who's bagging your groceries at Target? Like, yeah, they had online coach in their bio, but they weren't actually making their living doing that. You brought up a couple good points. Like, maybe you have actually answered emails on the beach behind you, but I've never sat, I live in Arizona. The sun shines, 99% of the year. I've never sat outside and worked in the sun with the desert palm or the palm trees looking over me. Like, if you're busy and you're building a business, there's not a lot of glamour to it.
Right.
I'm holed up in this little apartment for 10, 12 hours a day. Sometimes I push my own training sessions back. As you're taking on more clients, you talked about analytics. That's stuff you have to be looking into to continue to scale your business. Every time I get a surge of inquiries and I take on new clients, on one hand, I'm like, cool, business is booming. On the other hand, I'm like, wow, I just indebted myself with a lot of work that I now have to do while taking care of my existing clients, while being a competitive bodybuilder myself, while still playing the game and being active on social media and putting out content. There's so many different facets of, like, if you actually want to be a coach who makes a living doing this. And I understand what you're saying about when I tell some, yeah, what's your profession? Oh yeah, I'm an online trainer. Like, oh, you count to 10 for people. Like,
yeah, exactly.
That's not all I do, but we'll let you think that.
Right.
When I was a firefighter, I tell someone I'm a firefighter, it's much more respected. The conversation,
Mm-hmm.
oh, thank you for your service. You're such what would make you want to run into burning buildings? I was like, I don't know. I only work 10 days a month. So
yeah.
But I think people listening really need, like, I know Joe and I are the same. Like, we want respect as much as we want to build a business and work for ourselves. Like, I want to be respected by those like yourself and others who are higher up the mountain. Like, Dante Trudell is someone I'm close with. Obviously, Dusty Hanshaw is my mentor. Getting the respect of those guys and being like them telling others that I've earned my way and I've earned my spot. That means just as much to me as how much money I make, because I don't know. I think even though I did miss the message board era, I'm a blue collar person. So respect means a lot, both as a competitive bodybuilder and then as a coach in the industry, because no one wants to be talked about as like, oh, that guy doesn't know what the fuck he's doing. He's just good at marketing.
Yeah.
So you made a couple of good points, and I really wanted to highlight those for people that are thinking about getting into coaching. Like, it's not glamorous. Like, you're not just sitting on a laptop with a pina colada. I mean, maybe you do out there. I don't know. It's a lot of work.
Yeah, it is, no question. And the respect, you make a very good point about respect. And there was an issue where a guy, John and I got a laugh out of this because it finally happened. And I say finally happened to John. It's been a while, but remember, I've been around for a long time. Someone stole the shit and they were selling his shit. And I immediately called him up and I'm laughing, literally laughing at him. And he knew right away what I was talking about. And I said, it's just one of those things that, yes, you need to go after him. His situation was a little bit different because they were immediately monetizing his shit. It was plagiarism and it was so easy to prove. And because it was something like Amazon or eBay, nonetheless, if you know what you're doing, eventually someone's going to take your shit and they're going to try to benefit from it. And that happened to me as well. The respect issue is the thing that stands out to me. And that is this. I thought about when it happened to me and I thought, what an odd situation when you have your clients who respect you and, oh, you're in your little echo chamber. Adam McVeigh said that one time and I jumped his ass for it. But in hindsight, he was right. Social media is a giant echo chamber because you have control. There's no check and balance like there was on the boards. You have control over if someone is going to be negative to you, you just block them and you don't have to deal with them and nobody has to see it.
Yeah, you delete the comment and that's it.
Exactly. We didn't have that on the boards. You had to stand there and battle, and as un-PC as it is, you had to stand there and be a man and you had to back up and prove. You don't have to prove anything anymore. So the respect issue, imagine being a trainer and your clients respect you, but your peers don't. How horrible must that feel? And one of the things that I am
just made my stomach stink. My stomach sunk when you just said that, like thinking about that. Like,
exactly.
I got goosebumps when you said
it's
that.
like standing. I don't know if you guys have height issues. I don't like to look down because when I look down, I'm like, it's like, and my taint will tickle, like my butt tickles. And that's that feeling of, I can't imagine how that feels because I've been fortunate is because I've been in the industry for so long that I am respected by my peers. And I say never, my wife and my kids will tell you this, I don't like to speak in absolutes. So I don't ever want to have that issue where I battle with someone who respects me or I respect them, probably because I haven't had it yet. And I don't want to have to deal with that. I'm just fortunate that I haven't had to. So the respect it's huge. I mean, shit, you're in an industry that you spent a long time in and you're respected. The other thing is you guys are different. Please don't anyone listening to this or you guys think that I'm looking down on you guys because you just started, because that is not how I look at things at all. Tommy, you made a good point. You're working with Dusty. You have these people who are, they respect what you're doing and they're supporting what you're doing. You're not even remotely close to the person that I'm talking about. I'm talking about the guys that you were referring to, Tommy, the guys who took 7th in a novice show. And you know what? I'll even say this. I don't even know if competing, I mean, you need to compete because you need to walk the walk. You need to know, and your clients need to know, that you experience these things, whether it's gear, whether it's what it feels like to get on stage, dealing with the anxiety, the questioning of yourself, the second guessing, all that shit.
Man, I say it all the time. Like, how can you tell someone at 3 weeks out, like, hey, I need to lower the food and up your cardio, when you don't know what that feels like? Like, if you don't know what it feels like to really sit there for 7 minutes and contemplate whether or not it's worth getting up to go take a piss or not, how could you possibly put someone through that? Tommy and I talk about this all the time. It's like, how could you possibly ask someone to do these things if you've never done it yourself?
Let me throw one more thing at you, just to be, because you make a very good point that is understood by everybody listening. Lower, increase cardio and reduce calories. But what if I come at somebody at 3 weeks out and it's my 212 pro, or it's someone who's getting ready to get a pro card, and I tell them, we have to push your calories up. We need to pull your cardio down. Even someone who is experienced and is going to be like, are you fucking kidding me? So that is that trust of Skip or whoever their trainer is knows what they're doing. I'm listening. I'm executing. I'm not going to argue. And there's nothing wrong with asking questions. I tell my clients this all the time. Trainers need to get, I think, my perspective on this might be a little bit different. I see it changing over the last 10 years, but I would like to think that I had something to do with it. We not only get results for our clients, but I feel we're obligated to give them as much knowledge as we possibly can. And it used to be 10 years ago, don't ask questions, trust the process. You're asking, why are you questioning me? Almost
it's still, depending on who you ask, that's still a hot debate now, even where it's like,
exactly.
You see big time coaches now make public posts where they're like, my job is to get you a result. It's not to teach you. I am not, you are not hiring me to teach you.
And everybody can do it the way they want to.
Sure.
I don't believe that's the way it should be. I feel that clients are paying us good money. And I think that there's two things wrong. I said I wouldn't say right or wrong, but I do think it's wrong. It's maybe it's not wrong. It's my approach versus their approach. I want my clients to not only pay me what I think is an absolute absurd amount of money, because it is for what I do. I type. This isn't heart surgery. I'm not extending anyone's life. I'm not bringing a life into this world. This is a first world extra disposable income type of thing that we are blessed to be able to do. So I just have the different perspective. I'm not saying it's not important to people. That's not what I'm not saying it's, not important. I'm saying is it's not saving someone. It's not being a heart surgeon. It's not being a nurse, not going and pulling someone out of a fire. But I think I'll go back to this. There's two things that bother me about it, about not explaining things. Number one, a lot of trainers don't explain things because they can't.
Exactly.
And if you have a trainer who can't, and I have my own clients, if I can explain to you why you need to do something, then you should not be doing it. And that goes for me or anybody else. Because if you can't explain why you don't have enough knowledge, in my opinion, to be able to tell someone to do things. The other thing is people, trainers like to guard, and I understand why. They want to guard their information as if it's some sort of magic bullet or secret. There are things that I know that another trainer might or might not know. The bulk of why I'm good at what I do is my ability to know when to make changes, my sensing of time versus, where getting to goal, where we are, the pace, things like that. Can go to a Swiss symposium, or I can listen to podcasts. I can hear something and go, oh shit, I better check. I didn't know that. So there are things I will gain, things everybody else will gain. It's just there. I feel like there are things that are magic that we need to keep to ourselves when someone is paying us, and maybe it's because I'm paid better than I don't know, but I feel that obligation that only getting results. And this is what will help set trainers up from other people. There are too many people doing what we do. So you better look at it just as results, because too many people can get results. I could pull 100 trainers right and I could get. There are people who are not trained. I'll tell you right now, and I love throwing this name out to be respectful to this guy. I wish he would have stayed in the game. He was also a mutual friend, still is, of Justin Harris. But Nick Wolf, he used to have Wolfpack Nutrition back in the day, and his wife is still, she looks ridiculous. Her condition is absolutely insane, and it's hard because of what Nate knows. And Nate decided to get out of the biz back in the message board. It's probably 07, 08, because he was just tired of dealing with all the drama and the bullshit. Instead, that he did that because he would probably be a top one of the trainers, online trainers, and making an incredibly good living, which isn't to imply that he doesn't he does a good living. I don't know. I'll tell you myself, there's no fucking way that I could step away from what I do, even if I hated it, because I cut my revenue by 75%. I have no college education. I have no skill set out of working with kids. This is what I do. When I was upset about it in 2012, mentioned about how narcissistic and shitty and sucky everybody, the competitor, and I don't want to train these assholes anymore. I can't stand them. Because you're an expensive scout. Sometimes you just really look at it and you go, God, you're in the best condition you've been in. You took a second because fucking freak shows up. Right. I was showing Chicago with 2 clients last night. The weekend was finished, but the weekend before, and I see a guy across this is in Chicago, okay, North Chicago, or I stayed in North Chicago. Maybe it wasn't in North Chicago, it was in Chicago. But anyway, I took there and I see a guy walking across the lobby. And I'm like, God, it's like Austin Stiles. And then my brain started to go, oh, Austin's in Ohio. That definitely is Austin Stiles. He's going to be in my client's light heavy class. Yeah. And sure as shit, as soon as my clients saw, like, as I was talking to Austin briefly, he was there with Cliff Wills, and Cliff had an extra set of eyes for him. And it was just funny. We were just talking about Austin. So my point is, you have control over who shows up. Okay.
Yeah, you can't play defense.
Somebody who is better than you are.
So Skip, one thing that I try to remember to ask all of the guests that we have on, is what is the best piece of advice that you've ever received from someone else? And what is the worst piece of advice that you've ever received from someone else?
Best piece of advice from a body standpoint.
Doesn't even have to be bodybuilding. And especially like you were talking about, like the coaching business and what you would relay to younger coaches. If it's in terms of business, I mean, let it rip, man. Just anything that comes to mind that is a really valuable piece of advice that you've received from somebody else.
I've received so much over the years. That's going to be hard. Been married for 30 years and have raised 4 kids. I've received advice, in that sense. That's a tough one. The that I've received, man. I don't usually get stumped. Let me come.
Or you could start with the worst. Like if you know that if you remember a piece of advice that somebody gave you at the time, they were trying to help you, and maybe you followed through with it and it just didn't work out, or it was something that stood out to you like, man, I will tell people not to do this, even though this guy told me to do it.
Does it need to be bodybuilding related?
Not at all.
Okay, well, I'll tell you what comes to mind. I don't want to bore anybody with, but I have been married for 30 years, and my wife is very cool. We have 4 kids. We have 3 grandkids, which in the industry doesn't have a whole lot because of the narcissism and because people are just so, what I want to say, consumed by all things building. One of the things, advice that I was given, or advice that I heard that I completely did disagree with, and I think that the large majority of people should disregard, is that, and I need to explain it real quickly, so because I don't want to be taken out of context, but your marriage relationship is hard work, and I know that sounds kind of cliche, but there are times there will be work. Times it say work in the sense that you need to be patient to be, and I'm gonna test into bodybuilding too, but that you need to be patient and you need to work through things. But if your relationship is predominantly hard work, I think you're in the wrong fucking relationship. And the reason I can say that is because I have had, being together for 30 years, and I was young, raising 4 kids. You battle with, at first you battle with money, and then decisions, raising kids. You lose people along the way. There are a lot of things there. There are even other things that we don't all want to dirty laundry. It shouldn't be this massive amount. I'm going to tie it into bodybuilding clients. Say this. It gets yourself to the point where you don't have to work with everyone who approaches you. Okay. When I first started, it was difficult because I had kids to feed. I didn't have a fortunate situation. It was just myself and my wife. So when I made the decision to go, I remember sitting around in an Applebee's and literally presenting, like giving her this piece of paper and going, "This is what I make now. This is what I need to make to be able to just do this as my job essentially." And she looked up after a couple minutes while I was sweating my head off, and she said, "You already make this." And I smiled. I know. So at that point, moving forward, I had no choice. I had to take clients who want to work with me. And
Sure.
there finally came a point where I had worked hard enough that I was able to choose, frankly. And and thank the Lord sometimes, because now that I've done it for so long, when someone approaches me, and I have a back and forth with them, even though I haven't met them, and I'm not faced with them, because I've been doing this for so long, you're able to weed out, you're able to see red flags, things that won't work. If someone comes to me and they say, and this is a huge red flag, "I don't care what I have to do. I have to win this show. This is all that matters to me. I'm too busy. I don't have any opens right now." And the reason I say that is because if you get you into your best condition ever, your genetics might suck. I don't have any control over whether Ross just out or anybody else, Phil Heath for that matter. I can Phil Heath. Right. It mattered the condition I was in. I was not going to beat Phil even in 2003. So no one was going to quite, and no one did for quite a while. So you don't have any control of that. You control the variables that you can control. So that person would have potentially walked away and been in his best condition ever. Whenever I worked fucking miracles for that person, and it would have been a loss. It would have been a failure, not just a loss, but a failure. That is a huge red flag for me. So guess what I'm saying is we're talking about bad advice and good advice. That would fall under the line of good advice. Get yours to the point. You don't have to take everybody who comes on board. If you can keep the job that you're doing, do it. And you can't do the two anymore till one is getting away of the other. Then transition. That allows you to not have to stress. I can tell you what it felt like after I quit that job. I was happy. I was like looking at my kids going, "Oh shit, man." Like, informed. So I don't know what's happened. Maybe I'm gonna have to go back and get a regular job. It was years where I would realize I won't ever have to go back to a regular job. And it's anytime you go out on your own, time you're doing it doesn't, if you're a carpenter or what you're doing, it's feast or famine. It's all you. You might not have to deal with the boss, and everybody will think what you do is so fucking awesome. You got to deal with the clients. That's enough of a boss right there. But not dealing with the boss, or not dealing with petty coworkers, which they have to deal with people online and your articles and your podcasts and everything else. But it is, so in some fashion it happens anyway. But to the point where you build if you want to call it an empire, your business or whatever, your brand, to where you yield more and more control as you go, and you don't have to, you can pick and choose, and you have more control over what you're doing. But God, good advice that I received. The bitches I've received so much that honestly on the spot, I don't know they narrow it down. And that is not because I haven't received good advice. It is, I just can't.
That's all right. Being that you don't have an answer for that now, it means that you have to come back on at another point and give us that answer.
Oh, I'd be happy to come back. So the temptation probably sounds like that.
But yeah, I think this is a good point to wrap it up here. We're about an hour in, and we know how busy you are and how valuable your time is. So we appreciate it. We can't thank you enough for coming on, and we would love to have you back on, like we just said. So thanks to everybody that listens and writes in questions, leaves comments. For Tommy Stiles, for Skip Hill, I'm Joseph PIRCHER. This was a Thinking Man's podcast. And until next time, guys, we are out.
A Thinking Man's podcast.